Chintan, welcome. Let's dive right into your origin story. So, could you please share your life story in as much detail as possible?
My story much detail. This is gonna be a long, it's a really long one. So my folks are immigrants. They came from India. I was born here in Chicago, and I grew up, in a kind of lower middle class, blue collar, kind of neighborhood outside of Chicago. And growing up, I think there's certain parts of growing up here as an immigrant that can be tough. Uh, I've had some of that, and a lot of that instilled a very strong sense of justice and fairness in me from a very, very young age. So those are a couple things that are very important to me and foundational. Being the kid of immigrants from India, everyone asks you as a kid, what are you going to be when you grow up? And the expected answers are kind of doctor, engineer, and then some other kind of professional in that descending order. And I early on decided that it would be cool and interesting and fun to become an international lawyer. Now, I didn't know quite what that meant, but it did sound interesting, kind of lawyer plus flying around the world and jet setting and whatever. Right? So to the little kid, at the time, that was kind of the interesting thing. Anyways, I set that as my intention, and I just stuck with that for many, many years. Right? And so I did all the things I wanted out. Right? So, went to school and took the LSATs and went to law school, ended up working at the U.S. Board of International Trade, and landing a job at a really fantastic international law firm, in this case, an English firm with a very international practice, and found myself, kind of one day, a kind of bona fide international lawyer. I happened to be living in Hong Kong at the time that I had this particular realization, which was that I had kind of set a goal for myself, which was a bit of my personal mountain to climb. And, for many, many years, I just, kind of put one foot in front of the other, and had my head down and was just climbing and climbing and climbing. And one day I realized that I had kind of reached the pinnacle of that proverbial mountain. And I kind of picked my head up and looked around and decided that the view wasn't quite as inspiring as I imagined it would be. I realized that something was missing. This is this kind of nagging feeling inside of me for many years that maybe I was meant to do more, or at least to give it a try. Right? That I wanted to have a deeper connection to that sense of purpose and justice and fairness that I've had as a young kid, and I've carried with me all of these years. I went to law school with a view towards helping people, advocating, and had a chance to think about and study kind of these big topics, justice and fairness, and how does society can become a more perfectly managed. And then you get out, and then you're practicing law, and you're negotiating contracts, and you're helping effectively move large piles of money from here to there and there. And oftentimes, at the most successful, the biggest firms, you're helping the most successful, kind of folks in society to be successful. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. And that's important work. And it was a fantastic training ground for, a young professional. But I realized that I needed to do more. And I realized that if I was going to have an opportunity to find that purpose and that calling, it was going to be through an entrepreneurial adventure where I could be the captain of my own ship. And that was something that was very important to me. And I realized that I needed to have that autonomy, that freedom to make decisions and reap the reward, but also deal with the consequences of those decisions. That's something that excited me. And so I started kind of thinking about it in 2009. I just came back from Hong Kong, I moved back to New York in mid-09. Started really thinking about this, having conversations, and really kind of making preparations for January 11th, 2010, so a little over 15 years ago. I set sail, so to speak, but in reality, all I did was just jump into the water and start swimming. There wasn't really a ship to captain. At the time, it was the question, the predominant question was, can I survive? Can I get from here to there? And can this work? Can I have my own practice where I have clients that I provide, the best that I can, and they pay me for that work, and they also come back, and they also introduce me to people, and and can that actually just take flight, right, so to speak? And kind of year after year, the practice continued to grow to the point where I could start to get choosy about who I was working with, what I was doing with them, the types of things that we were doing, the type of advice that I was providing. I was also able to start to hire people to support me. And those people got progressively more talented, more capable, to the point where I ultimately got to the point where, I had been working with impact investors, from the very beginning. And I got to the point around 2012 where I said, this is really what I'm going to do. Using the tools that I can bring to the table, tools as a creative problem solver with a legal background. Someone who understands how financial structures are built, how companies interact, how deals are made, how they fall apart, how they merge back together again. How ultimately, really what we're talking about is relationships. Human relationships are built to be resilient and to be able to kind of create value, right, from those relationships happening. And I could practice those skills in furtherance of the really ambitious and innovative goals of a group of visionaries who were and continue to be our clients to this day. Same visionaries as what they truly are. These are folks who believe that we can make the world a better place, and they look to do that by using the full spectrum of tools available to us, right? So that can be public policy and advocacy and really helping activate the public and governmental channels. That can be through philanthropic giving and innovative approaches to how nonprofits engage in helping create solutions to society's scale challenges and problems. And of course, the private sector. How the profit motive, how incentives and disincentives and corporate and financial structures can be utilized to harness multiple bottom line objectives, right? Kind of doing well by doing good. How can businesses grow and thrive by creating innovative solutions to problems that have a grand societal scale? How can financial structures be utilized to incentivize regular everyday consumers or participants to make decisions that are net beneficial both for them as well as the society within which they live and operate, or nature, that can be climate positive? How can we invest in solutions to climate change adaptation challenges? Or how can we invest in solutions to carbon reduction? Or how can we help create a circular economy and ecosystem? How can we help deploy capital into places where historically it hasn't flowed? Because these visionaries, and I also agree, we believe that talent and entrepreneurialism and human function is equally distributed across all parts of society. Opportunity isn't. And so if you believe in that underlying premise, then it's just a matter of getting capital and access to those brilliant potential future entrepreneurs, future leaders, future leaders, And how do you do that? You overcome those structural challenges. You use creative thinking, creative approaches, collaborations to get resources to people, and they do what they do, and they do it well. And that, frankly, can be the basis for a very lucrative investment strategy. At the same time, it can be a vector for starting to address persistent challenges to development. And that's the beauty of this space, as you well know. That's why I do. That's why and that's why that is the kind of ethos of our firm. That is why we exist. It's what we do. It's what we aim to try to be at the forefront of. And that's why we wake up every day and innovate. And kind of bring a passion and energy and a sense of kind of flexibility and creativity that is connected to the very kind of grounded understanding of tax and regulation and market practice and kind of how corporations and corporate entities are structured and how funds are built and how capital is deployed according to a venture strategy or a private equity strategy or a credit strategy, right? Kind of, it's the marrying of that kind of big picture vision and that ground level technical capability and acumen that really makes this firm and kind of my chosen calling in life, that really is what makes it work.
It's beautiful that your calling is still powerful and still relevant, even 15 years on. If we can time travel back to that moment of inflection, two things. One, did you have to at least reach a level of achievement in life or professionally to have realized this? Second, what was entrepreneurship a straightforward option for you? Or the other way around, given that many people, when lost, move to another firm, perhaps go back to study, completely change to go over to nonprofit or even farming, why impact law firm?
Yeah. Thank you. It's such a good question, right? So I'll kind of answer the first bit first, right? So if I were to go back and kind of look at what were the key, determinants or key instances that kind of allowed me, the doors that were open and unlocked, etc. So, and there have been significant, right? So I oftentimes say, my success, whatever it is, whatever it happens to be, at given times it's here, it fluctuates, but my success is a function of, I'd say, maybe like 98% hard work and 2% just luck. Right? You could say dumb luck, right? But luck, I also believe, is what you make of it. Right? Kind of having your eyes open and seeing opportunities, as well. But, a lesson I learned along the way was to have confidence in the face of the unknown. Because when you take that entrepreneurial, this goes to the question of what people do right when, kind of you're looking to change your circumstances. Sometimes people look for, and understandably so, the comfortable option. Say, well, I have a certain standard of living and I need to find something that can allow me that, etc. The uncertainty of whether I'll be able to maintain that standard of living is an example of the uncertainty that you face when you're looking at, a change, right? Well, there's a couple things I was saying. So from my perspective, people say, I'm sweet. And I say, well, the difference between me today and me back in the day when I had a job was that my risk is highly diversified. Actually, your company, if you're working in a company, your company can, have a bad quarter and still let you get into have an issue with your immediate kind of supervisor, and find yourself on the street the next day. You can have, any number of things, right? A deal could go wrong, right? Like, blah, blah, blah. And then you basically have one loss. That's your employer. As an entrepreneur, I have 95 losses, some of which I fired because they're not a good fit, or they're asking us to do things that we're not interested in doing. They don't work with us in the way that we expect to be, to work. Any number of reasons, right? We are very choosy. We decide to work with, at the outset, because we want to do great work. We want to enjoy the experience and our life along the way. And ultimately, we want to have an impact, and the way that we have an impact is by collaborating with these other things. And so I do have maybe a slightly different view of risk and diversification when it comes to kind of employment and that kind of dimension of life, right? But confidence in the face of uncertainty is a difficult thing for me. And it was for a very long time until I realized that it's not really confidence in the uncertainty. It's confidence in yourself in the face of uncertainty. And this gets to the second point, right? Is that, my parents are immigrants, right? They were allowed to come to the United States as young college graduate students from India because they were at the top of their specific professions at that point in time, and that happened to be something that the U.S. as a policy matter decided that they needed and that it would be beneficial to them. So my mom was a physician, my dad's an engineer, and it happened to be that, at the time that they were, coming to graduate from their respective colleges, the U.S. universities were young engineers and physicians from countries including India. And so they both had to come to the United States, study and work. But at the time, as a kid growing up, I just viewed my parents as professionals. And so I kind of set up a professional career path for myself in life. And one of the things that I didn't realize, it was staring at me in the face all along, I didn't realize until many, many, many years later, is that both of my parents, while being professionals, were both employers. So my mom, as a physician, always had her own practice. And incidentally, always had practice that was exclusively devoted to serving the poorest communities wherever we lived, right? So when we lived in Chicago, she had a clinic on the south side of Chicago and worked basically exclusively with Medicare and Medicaid patients. Because she had that sense of giving back and to provide care to these communities that otherwise didn't have access. My dad, interestingly enough, was a chemical engineer who was one of the very first environmental engineers working in air quality in the city of Chicago. So none of those things were kind of things I was paying attention to. And now they come back, I see myself as an impact that works on kind of social justice issues and environmental issues, and I see these connections. But the other, maybe less obvious connections to me was, like I said, my mom had her own clinics, and my dad became an engineer. Became an entrepreneur in life and running a business. And so maybe there's something about having that in your blood or in your bones, so to speak. It was kind of around me, growing up, even though I don't think I witnessed it specifically. Being an entrepreneur, I think one of the critical kind of necessary ingredients to being an entrepreneur is the ability to say, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I have confidence in myself. I know I'm willing to put in work. I know I have the knowledge and the capability. I have the relationships. I have, the the wherewithal to just get out and figure out how to make it happen. That is something that I think anyone can have, but not everyone does have. Not everyone focuses on. Not everyone, kind of maybe nurtures that feeling, right? But am I uniquely qualified to do the things that I do as compared to my peers who are at traditional firms? No, of course not. But I'm very comfortable. I actually enjoy the entrepreneurial experience. I enjoy kind of the ups and the downs and the uncertainty and all of that. Sometimes I say, listen, I started at zero. Like I said, when I started out, there wasn't a boat. I just jumped into the water and started swimming, so to speak, right? And started building the ship, so to speak. And now I'm the captain of let's say, a small ship. And I have a fantastic team right now. So we're able to go far and we're able to go fast. We're able in ways that I never was in the earlier days. And it comes with a certain responsibility. Right? So not just looking after myself and saying, hey, can I put food on my table? Can I look after people that depend on my ability to lead and make decisions, make the right decisions? And that's something that it's an honor to be able to have, right? To lead a team. But I think that's a perspective that I have. You can look at it as an honor, you can look at it as a responsibility, you can look at it as a lot of different things. But that's kind of genuinely how I choose to look at it. Therefore, I think that in an entrepreneurial kind of path is the one for me. As you pointed out in your question, right? It's not for everyone. And there are lots and lots of really great opportunities to be entrepreneurial to a certain extent. Within big organizations. And certain people are just really good at operating and navigating a large system, bureaucracy, etc. I'd be the first to say that I'm probably not one. For whatever capabilities I may have on the entrepreneurial side of the spectrum, I certainly don't think I have in terms of navigating large bureaucratic systems, intellectual firms, etc. Right? It's just it's not the same. It's not something that excites me.
I work with a lot of founders, and they obviously have some level, at least a base level of self-confidence, as well as some form of mission. Mostly a broader vision that is tied to some form of positive impact. So better health for a specific segment of the population, or how to reverse climate change. Now, combining self-confidence with a mission, I do think is a powerful generator of the movement or the action, but maintaining that momentum also requires a certain level of force. How do you make sure that we actually can maintain self-confidence, especially in those times that we actually need to maintain those, that we can actually still pursue mission, both from intra and interpersonal perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's such an important kind of issue. So I totally agree, and I really like the way that you framed it. That successful founders need to have a level of self-confidence, but also a vision. Right? Because self-confidence by itself doesn't get in vision without execution doesn't. You need both, right? So I've kind of mentioned too that I have a sense of confidence in terms of where I'm going and my ability to do the things that it takes to get to the next step. But where do all those steps culminate? Where are they pointing to? Right? The vision. It's what I think about is building the impact economy around the world, right? So building the global impact economy. What does that really mean? What I mean by that is helping create a impact economy, an economy where multiple bottom line engagement, investment, business creation, etc., is the norm. And it's the norm because it's been proven to work. it's been proven to work for all of the stakeholders, the investors, the entrepreneurs, the employees, the customers, the vendors, the broader communities within which they operate, and the natural environment that they draw resources from and put into. And so that's the dream that I have. I think that's the dream that I share with many people in this space, that the economy can truly work for all. The economy can be an organizing function in society that helps human beings, right, all of us come together to trade goods and services, etc. But to do so in a way that has a broader perspective, that has a more long-term outlook, and that really takes into consideration the externalities of our behavior, some of which are positive and some of which are negative, right? And and so what I feel like we're doing as a law firm is developing a very deep and rich understanding of those dynamics. How does business, in our case, particularly with the around the world, how does a business investing work? And what are those externalities? And of the positive externalities, how can those be aligned with positive revenue generation objectives and activities so that you create big extra returns that are driven by impact? And obviously, there are negative externalities as well. How can those be mitigated? Well, the first thing you have to do is recognize them, think about them, and kind of problem solve for them, right? How can they be mitigated? How can they be priced back into the system so that they're not just dumped back at the expense of a common, in our case, as nature, and the common resources that we all share? Those are really difficult questions. We certainly don't have all the answers. We are engaged very deeply in the pursuit of those answers. We're engaged in a journey that is really focused on gaining a better and deeper understanding of, of those questions, right, and the answers to those questions, which then help us create systems that are net beneficial. And I think that if we can do that, and if we can prove time and again that this works, then people can make their own decisions. And I think that lots of people, and hopefully one day the majority of people, will choose to live and operate in this economy and really kind of move, I think, society forward in a way that our current economic system isn't, or is maybe holding us back. This idea of like very short-term, profit-driven, incentives, right? Profits are not bad, right? I think they're absolutely essential. And looking at the short term is obviously very important in terms of collecting and utilizing relevant and important data. But there's a lot more that I feel like in the current economy we're not incentivized to focus on, or we're disincentivized to focus on. And so, that's so that's the vision. And as and when we're able to continue making incremental gains towards that vision, one day we'll have a society that operates on an economy that works better for more people, that operates more harmoniously with the natural environment. That's what it's all about. So for me, it's confidence that I can do the things that I need to do to continue forward, and that North Star vision of what I hope to help bring about one day. Those are the two critical ingredients to keeping me going.
You mentioned earlier that you select some customers and you perhaps don't, you perhaps choose not to work with some. Now, assuming that they all have some understanding of impact and they'd have projects that are tied to impact, how do we differentiate different kinds of impact and prioritize those? Because I do agree with you in having or setting a really great impactful precedent so that the rest of us could follow. But then the question is, what kind of precedent should that be? What kind of impact should that be? And how do we optimize for that?
Yeah, it's so important, right? Because impact, one of the things I often say is impact is a spectrum. It's not a silo, it's not a particular thing, it's not an asset class. Right? The impact community are under the impact tent. You have profit seeking investors that say, hey, listen, I'm here to invest in solutions to societal scale challenges. I'm not interested in trading economics for impact in any way, shape, or form. I'm non-concessionary and I I expect market or better returns from my investment portfolio. I expect impact. Okay, that's one group of folks. And on the other hand, you have groups of folks that say, we're impact first investors. We think that it's impossible to seek market returns and actually move the needle on the societal developmental goals that we're trying to achieve. We're still interested in using economic structures because they're very effective tools for organizing, aggregating, allocating, deploying capital into organizations that are doing things that are net beneficial. But if we put that extra burden on those organizations that are doing really important development work and at the same time, you have to create market returns, then you're going to be sacrificing the developmental or the impact gains that those organizations are meant to achieve. Also, yes, right? So I say yes to both of those folks, right? Like those are, I think, 2 points along this spectrum of impact, and there are many points to the left and right, and in between these 2 examples that I just gave you. But I would tell you that there's a commonality between both of those. That takes multiple bottom line perspective to what they're doing. They're saying that we're engaging in these 2 examples, investment activity. We have a return expectation. Those expectations can be different. They can live with us. And we have impact return expectations, financial and impact return expectations. In these 2 examples, those both are along the spectrum as well. So both of those very interesting pursuits for me. I have a lot of thoughts and perspectives. How you can be successful over here and how you can be successful over here. The difference is what tools you use over here. All of those are very interesting considerations. But, your question was really about how and we choose to work with because clients. And it's a question for people on my team as well. And the answer is very clear. We do not have those. You don't have to be an impact investor. You don't have to call yourself an impact investor. You don't even have to have heard of impact investing. Now that's less the case these days, because everyone's heard of it at least. Not everyone has the same, perspective and understanding, as everyone else. And that's fine. But, my perspective on that is that, we're looking to work with people. We're looking to support people who have a vision that we can align with, that recognize their business, their economic activity, their investing activity has consequences, and that those consequences are relevant to how we go about what we do, and more importantly, why we do what we do. So when I talk to potential clients, I often tend to ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why do you want to do this? So a lot of times people come to me and say, they talk about what and how much. And they're like, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and this is what I think it's going to look like, and how much it's going to cost. I'm like, cool, I can speak to all of this points, but before we get to that, let's talk about why you want to do this. And some people are like, that's a great question, and they dive right into it. Some people scratch their heads and say, what do you mean? Like, what difference does it make to you why you want to do this? And that's an indicator right there, right? The why question informs our ability to provide what I think is really great guidance, really contextual guidance for some level of labor. So I'll give you an example. We've had instances where people come to us and say, hey, we want to build X, Y, and Z, and this is what I think it's going to look like, how much it's going to cost. And I say, well, why do you want to know X, Y, and Z? And we get into the question of like, well, what's the underlying purpose? What are we trying to solve? Oh, we're trying to actually solve a really important problem. To which I have oftentimes come back and said, very cool, okay, I get your problem. I get the problem that you're looking to address. I'm totally excited about the opportunity to address that problem. I believe in that objective. I'm excited about it. And I'm not going to build you X. You're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I have thoughts on other ways to achieve that objective that may be more better suited to who you are or where you are. Timing or cost or risk or, you know what I mean? Kind of understanding that context helps us understand, all right, cool, well, we have the tools and we've seen lots of versions and permutations of all different things that are done kind of in the impact space, but that's informed by what the objective is, right? Like having a clear sense of purpose and clear understanding of the destination helps us be better navigators and guidance.
Let's say if, or rather when, you work on that at the impact project, that changes the trajectory, long-term trajectory of a country, if not a region, and is extremely successful, that the impact economy is visibly created. Do you think that would lead to another moment of realization for you to then perhaps change the way you then self-actualize, sort of similar to the previous moment 15 years ago?
That's a great one. Okay, so if or rather when we achieve that impact goal, there is a thriving impact economy, and it's running and growing, and you know does is such a good question. It's something I haven't thought about. Does the purpose and mission of the firm change, or have we achieved that mission and then there's no purpose for the firm anymore, or do we have a different purpose, etc. Right? That's a good one. You got me. You got me on one that I haven't thought about before, but I love it. So, okay, if or rather when that day comes, I think we'll still have the same purpose. I think that, the impact economy, or this idea that you have a multiple bottom line oriented, stakeholder kind of focused, long term kind of perspective uh, model as the predominant model in the global economy. That's not a static thing. The economy is dynamic and constantly changing, and I think that in that world we'll have a lot to do. I think that we'll have a lot to work on, right? Kind of all of those transactions, those enterprises, this kind of economic events, investments, etc. They will be, they will have those objectives. They'll be informed by those perspectives, and you'll need people, to help effectuate those things. Hopefully, there's a whole robust community of lawyers, law firms, investment bankers, consultants, advisors, fund managers, investment and accountants, and because the whole ecosystem of participants that understand and know and have expertise in doing this. And hopefully we're just one of many. Um, that would be a great day, and I think there will be plenty of stuff for us to do as a firm. And hopefully the firm continues to grow and far surpasses me in terms of what I can contribute. That's my hope for the firm. Now, my hope for myself is actually in a different pursuit, and it's something that I have an opportunity to do a bit of right now, which is to teach. And that's something that I really love. And right now I get to participate in this brilliant course led by a dear friend of mine, whose name is Panchal. And she is she's the lead in course at Oxford University's Study Business School, course called Impact Finance and Innovations. And I had the opportunity to fly into Oxford and late fall every year and spend a week with 30 to 40 of some of the most brilliant minds in the impact investing space world, and really talk about at the front edge of innovation in the impact space. What are the most innovative approaches, tools, perspectives that are being deployed and that have been successful in solving, these tricky issues that come up in impact. And so I have an opportunity to contribute to that conversation from the classroom, so to speak, and something that I very much enjoy and hope to do more of as time goes on, which then I think speaks to the point that I was making a minute ago, which is that you need a robust community of experts who are trying to have great experience and who can do this work, right? Can continue to engage in that economy. Right? The economy isn't stagnant; it's dynamic and intense. And so there will constantly be work to do in perspective helping grow and curate the impact space.
Great. Last question. Assuming that this is your last lecture, what kind of actionable piece of advice would you give to the next generation of impact professionals?
So I think that in order to bring about systems change, that's really what we're talking about changing the system as we know. We're not tossing it out the window and starting over from scratch, but rather we're modifying the plane as it's flying, so to speak. Changing the system from within and while it's continuing to operate. In some ways, I think it's maybe one of the most challenging things that one can do. But systems change is really what I would say is that when we're engaged in the pursuit of systems change, we have to constantly challenge our own assumptions about how things are or should be done, how tools are utilized and deployed, and what tools we should be using. What success truly does or can look like. What are true barriers and hurdles and challenges? I think that one of the mistakes that we have made as a space along the way is assuming that the paradigms of traditional finance, i.e. using a straight venture capital or private equity law to deploy capital into impact businesses that are multiple bottom line companies, was going to produce different results and multiple bottom line results. That's a matter of questioning the tools that we use. I think that the advice is don't take anything for granted. Don't take anything as gospel. If things are working over there, great. Let's study them, let's understand them, let's learn from them. And then let's really understand what our purpose is, what success looks like, what challenges to success could potentially exist, and then use those tools as a starting point. Use those objectives, challenge those assumptions, right? And really purposefully and thoughtfully rebuild the elements of the entire system that we're looking to change. I think that in order to achieve systems change, we have to actually engage in systems level change.
This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Chintan, and looking forward to our next conversation, even more in depth in New York and Oxford. Thanks.
Yeah, I would love it. I love that. Thank you. This has been a really fun conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing the dialogue. We'll talk.